What is going on, YouTube? This is Controlled Pairs with Controlled Pairs Gaming, and today we are showing you some Kerbal Space Program. I know some of you guys might be wondering why I haven't released a video in a while, and why I haven't been playing more Arma 3. Well, this is my excuse. Kerbal Space Program is a space exploration game. It's got realistic physics, realistic spacecraft, realistic building, and here you're going to see a mission where I take up a new piece to my space station. It is a fuel station. Here we're going to the launch pad, and I am using a modification called MechJeb, which is an autopilot modification that will help us guide our spacecraft to our space station and enable us to rendezvous with it, attach this new part to it, and then return home safely, hopefully. For those of you who already play a lot of Kerbal, I'm relatively new to the game. I've learned a lot of it pretty quickly from watching a lot of Scott Manley's videos and others, and those guys are excellent and teach you how to play pretty well. For those of you who do not understand Kerbal Space Program, I recommend doing some searches for tutorials and looking around a little bit more, because it is a very, very complex game and there's a lot to learn, a huge learning curve, but don't let that turn you off to the game, because it is fantastic. It's a lot of fun. Especially if you're into the realm of science and space exploration and things of that nature, or if you just like creative simulators like I do. Alright, so here, if you get a better look at my craft, I'm using 3 giant fuel tanks. Those ones on the outside, those are the only ones burning right now. The purpose is to fight through some of this thicker atmosphere. Right now we're just doing a vertical ascent to try to break loose of Kerbin's atmosphere with those 3 engines. Once we burn down those fuel tanks, we will go ahead and stage, which will separate those fuel tanks and those engines, reduce our mass, increase our thrust to weight ratio, and we will kick in our main orbital engine, which is the engine we will be using to rendezvous with the space station and dock with it and put our part into place. If you see up on the top of my craft, that is the fuel cell. You can see the command capsule there with Bob Kerman riding in it and controlling the spacecraft. Just above him is the fuel cell with a apparatus that we will dock with. What you just saw there was the D stage. There's a small explosion, but those are just some rafters and other unnecessary structural pieces that broke off when my fuel tanks did. I'm checking the orbit here to make sure that those that debris is gonna fall back safely to Kerbin. And looks like we had a very clean separation. We're still on track. My next engine has kicked in, and we are starting our gravity turn, which means we are moving into the orbital stage of our mission. And it's always a good sign when you hear that music. It means you've broken loose of the thicker gravity that surrounds Kerbin, and you're moving into the atmosphere. Alright, we're separating those unnecessary tanks. That was just a little extra fuel. And they harmlessly bounce off of those winglets that I've fixed to my orbital stage. And we are on track to do our rendezvous. In the bottom right of the screen, you can see MechJeb's rendezvous module, which shows us the distance to our space station and our velocity relative to it. Right now we're still working on circularizing our orbit as we speed up time a bit. Now the space station is at 200 kilometers above the surface of Kerbin, and so we're coasting to the apoapsis, or the highest point of our orbit right now, where you can make the most drastic adjustments to your orbit and circularize effectively without wasting fuel. So here we've reached 200 kilometers above it, And now we are going to fire a circularizing burn with the purpose of circularizing our orbit around Kerbin at 200 kilometers. And we're going to open our docking port shield here. There's no atmosphere anymore, so there's no risk of losing any of those panels. And you have to forgive me, I'm still fighting over a cold, so I sound like crap. Alright, so we've selected a space station here, which is just above us and coming up behind us right now. And we're working on setting our rendezvous up. So right now our intersect is 1 kilometer apart and looking good. The intersect is where our craft and the space station will cross one another. So if you have any questions about rendezvousing with other vessels in air or orbital operations or anything more in detail, I encourage you to look up tutorials for those things, because it's all very complicated at first. Once you get used to it, it's not such a big deal, but it's tough to get started. So here I've circularized our orbits, and we have selected our intersect point. We are going to move to that intersect point, and we are going to start the rendezvous and the docking. Excuse me. Alright, here we go. Alright, I'm turning on the smart ASS and engaging our RCS and pointing my ship directly at our target, which right now is 1.5 kilometers away. It should be coming into view quickly. Our relative velocity to our target right now is around 10 meters per second, and you can see it there on the horizon as we move closer to it. So I'm doing a nice slow burn, aligning our direction, which is the yellow circle on the nav ball on the bottom, to our target, which is the pink stationary indicator. So when they overlap, that means I'm going directly at my target. Here I switched to our docking mode and engaged our RCS, so I can fine-tune the controls. We have plenty of monopropellant, which is the RCS fuel, as you can see in the top right. And that's what we're going to be using to control the rest of the way here. I'm holding backwards on the S key while in docking mode to reduce my speed relative to that target. You can see it falling from 13 meters per second down. My space station is still in the early stages. It's been a total of 4 missions. This is the 5th mission so far in its construction. The first was to put the space station itself into orbit and make sure it was powered. The following 3 missions were attaching fuel cells to it, and this is the final fuel cell mission, and then we'll start building other docking ports and other power sources to it, and we'll have to bring up fuel from the surface of Kerbin to restock these fuel cells every once in a while. The purpose is, by putting a fuel station in orbit, I can increase the range of my missions and decrease the size of my ship. So I can simply take off, dock with the station, refuel, and continue on to the moon or Joule or Eve or any of the other planetary spheres that are flying around in the Kerbin solar system. We're still approaching the target at 4 meters per second. Right now it's about 165 meters away from us. And I'm looking for where my parking space is going to be, because I already know exactly where I need to dock in order to put this next piece on the space station. And you know, docking and rendezvous, this is all still pretty new to me as a somewhat novice in the game. I'm by no means an expert, and so I was very frustrated. Some of my first missions up here to put fuel cells on, I ended up attaching those fuel cells crooked, and so my space station looks like it's slightly imperfect, and it just bothers me. In the future, when I build these stations, I'm going to have to be more meticulous, and you'll see here in a minute as I dock, I make more of those silly mistakes. So what I did now, I flipped my craft over. On the nav ball, the brown area is the surface of Kerbin, and the horizon is the white line, and blue is up into the atmosphere, the sky. So by flipping my craft over, all of my RCS is now more easily controlled. It's not backwards, so I can more easily maneuver my craft in position to dock with the space station, which is what we are doing now. Right now we're still about 100 meters away, moving at only about a meter per second, as I try to search for where I'm going to park this thing. Still plenty of monopropellant left, and still plenty of liquid fuel left. Just enough to deorbit my craft and safely land back at Kerbal. Alright, I've identified where I need to put this last fuel cell. You can see the other three there already attached to the craft as we move within 65 meters of my space station. And we slide around here and get in position. The docking port is already open. Here momentarily you'll see me select the docking port that I want to dock with on the space station and set it as my target, which will allow me to fine-tune the final maneuver in the dock. Here I'm just using very small adjustments with my RCS, and also on my smart ASS with the MechJeb module I've selected Target Plus, which ensures that my craft will stay pointed towards the target throughout all of these maneuvers. And here we go, we've got it almost in line. We're only about 30 meters away from the target. I'm selecting the Clampetron docking port as my target now. So MechJeb will point directly at that docking port, and as you can see on the nav ball, I'm aligning my direction of travel with the docking port there perfectly. And you see I'm coming in crooked again. I'm coming in crooked. So at the last minute here, I'm going to have to make the adjustment to rotate this craft to the left. And so I'm making those last minute adjustments. I'm creeping up on that docking port, and we have a dock and a rotation at the last second right here. And there's the correction, and we are docked. And the camera will snap into this view right here, and we will then see the completed fuel station. There's plenty of more structural adjustments I can do, but now I've got 4 full fuel tanks attached to the space station, and I will be able to maneuver up here to the space station and dock with it and refuel in orbit and then continue missions. So when I docked, I caused a little rotation in the space station, which pisses me off. In Kerbal, this rotation will eventually just die off and it'll be back to normal. However, in real life with no atmosphere, we know that's not necessarily the case. The only thing influencing the station is the gravity of Kerbin here, and so it would take quite a long time for this rotation to die off in the real world. However, I'm trying to make these adjustments with my RCS right now. Right now I'm checking the apoapsis of my space station, making sure that both are still right around 200 kilometers. You see one's dropped about 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers. which is a slight problem, but it should correct itself within a few rotations. I'm giving up on this point and trying to stabilize it. My RCS ports on the station are all over the place, so I don't have very good control over the rotation at this point. So I try feebly here to try to reduce the rotation, eventually just give up and leave the station and start my return to Kerbin. It's a good looking space station though. I'm a little irritated that some of those fuel cells aren't completely level and in line. You can see there I improved. Two of them are pretty good. The one I just put up here is pretty good. So is the one immediately to its left. However, those two on the far side are definitely crooked, and that definitely irritates me. Alright, here we decouple, and we leave our station. Get some separation, fire up the RCS ports here in just a second, and start backing away until we have to rendezvous with it again on a future mission. Jebediah Kerman's up here in the space station, all by himself, just floating around in orbit, but he's a brave Kerbal, and we definitely need him up here to maintain the station. Alright, here's my craft, and we're gonna start to cheat and use MechJeb to get us back to the Kerbal spaceport, or space center I should say. So we'll flip on our landing autopilot, disable smart ASS, target Kerbal Space Center, and land at that target. So we start our time warp, and we slowly drift away from the space station as we get to our deorbit burn point. And MechJeb prepares to fire our deorbit burn, which is just a simple retrograde burn. Retrograde, for those who are unfamiliar, just means opposite of our direction of travel. You can see my orbit speed decreasing there from over 2,000 meters per second rapidly. Still falling in the 1,800 meters per second. We're firing a course correction burn right now, which just means a slight plane change to get us on course to land at the Kerbal Space Center. Bob Kerman looks concerned, but he doesn't need to be. Everything's going as planned. He looks a little worried down there. We're a little low on fuel. Got just over 60 units of fuel left, which, you know, it's actually plenty. It'll get us back to Kerbin. Alright, we're templated to land within 1 kilometer of Kerbal Space Center at this time, so we're looking good. And once again, checking how the space station is doing. Still in orbit, unaffected by our burn. Alright, as we warp a little bit closer to the ground, we execute one more course correction burn. We're looking good. On course for a safe landing. Of course, I won't actually be performing a manual landing. I'll just deploy my parachute in free fall and hopefully land somewhere near Kerbal Space Center. Only about 40 kilometers above the surface. We're getting low enough that here pretty quick we'll start to re-enter Kerbin's atmosphere, and you'll see the friction between the atmosphere and the vessel heat up, and we will have to do our dynamic re-entry. Right about now. There you go. You can see that the craft start to heat up and start flying back into the atmosphere, and you see our speed dramatically reduces as we burn through the atmosphere, and we start to feel the resistance of the oxygen, the wind, and the atmosphere of Kerbin. I assisted decelerating here with a manual burn just to decrease our speed and hopefully land a little bit closer to Kerbal Space Center. And here we are clear just about of the atmosphere of Kerbin, and we've safely completed our re-entry. I'll fire another couple manual burns here to decrease our speed and land a little bit closer to the Space Center. It looks like we are on track, so here pretty soon we'll prepare to separate into our final stage and get ready to deploy our chute. And we'll go ahead and decouple that last stage. And get ready to deploy our radial mount parachute for a nice safe landing. Alright, about 3 kilometers above the ground at this time. We'll go ahead and deploy the chute, and it'll start to reduce our speed. Should fully inflate right about 500 meters off the ground. And it looks like we're going to land right next to the spaceplane hangar. There you see our final stage about to impact right there. And we have a good open canopy. 535 meters, chute fully deployed. We have a nice view of the spaceplane runway from Bob Kerman's point of view inside the craft. Moving at about 5 meters per second towards the ground. Still got plenty of time before we land here. Poor design decision on my part, you know. My chute's deployed here, and I see my mech jeb module, the control pod there, facing straight towards the ground, which will inevitably explode when we impact, but it shouldn't affect the stability of Bob Kerman in the command pod there. Great view of Kerbal Space Center as we come to land. We have the vehicle tracking station, that satellite building over to the right, as well as the vehicle hangar here near us, and the launch pad, of course, and the spaceplane hangar, which we might actually end up landing on top of, it looks like. Nope, maybe we'll be safe. Yeah, we'll just barely clear it. Ooh, man. And my chute was damaged by that final impact, and my mech jeb module was destroyed. But hey, Bob Kerman is safely back on Kerbal at the Kerbal Space Center. We'll repack the parachute. There we go. It wasn't actually damaged. Bob had a good flight. We took off and rendezvoused with our space station, successfully docked with it, and continued its construction by placing a 4th fuel cell on it. And that's that. So thank you guys for watching my video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you liked the video, please show that by liking it. If you have any questions, just let me know if you have any advice. I am a new pilot, and I'd appreciate your advice as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.